Hey y'all, welcome back to the Inner. Today I'm joined by my brother, Vernon Jiles. Hey, how you
Yeah,
doing today?
Apostle. Hey, I'm good. I appreciate it. How you doing about yourself, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. If you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Um, I'm Vernon Giles, as Apostle Nelson said. Originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. Actually was raised in Lincoln, Nebraska, for the majority of my life. And I actually around 2003, I moved back to New Orleans and actually live in Houston area by way of Hurricane Katrina. As far as my background, for the most part, I think majority of my life, 35 years of my life, I was a Christian. My grandfather on my father's side of the family was a minister, as well as grandmother was a church mother. Grandmother on my mother's side of the family was a preacher, as well as my grandmother was a church mother. So uh, the religion of Christianity pretty much was domesticated within my bloodline. As far as when I was young, my mother would read the Bible stories to us of Moses, David, and Goliath. I as a young boy, I began to hear what we would call the voice of God at a real young age. I remember, for the most part, we were attending a Baptist church, and my grandfather was an assistant pastor over at the Baptist church. And for the most part, I would be falling asleep, Apostle, to be honest with you. It was just kind of boring to me, so I just felt like it was time as a kid for my time to get my Z's on. And one day, as I'm asleep, I notice a sound that I begin to hear that I never heard before, and I could feel a presence that I never felt before. And as I begin to wake up, I realized that the sound and the presence was coming from my grandfather preaching. And immediately a thought came in me, just the knowing that, oh, this is what must be the presence of God feels like. Um, and so nobody taught me how to hear the voice of God. I just had a knowing as a boy, and there'd be times throughout my life that I just would feel that presence that was there. Just always felt like it was there. No matter what I would go through, it was there. And so I think because of that, I was different. A lot of people didn't understand me. I didn't really understand myself. Even I think a couple years later, my grandmother on my mother's side I'm sorry, my great grandmother had passed away, and I remember at her funeral crying like a baby, and I had to be about 5, 7 years old, somewhere around there, and everybody was asking me why I was crying because they just couldn't understand why a child would be crying that hard for an adult. And when they asked me, I just said to them that my grandmother Oli had died. That's why I was crying. But what I didn't understand then, and what I understand now, is that I was picking up on the spirit of grief that was upon everybody in the funeral service. And I didn't know why she was so important to people until my grandmother, a couple years ago, actually visited me out here in Houston, and she told me that my great grandmother was more so like the mayor of the country, the town that people were living in. So everybody looked to her for leadership. And so I seen why she was so important, and I could see why then I was picking up on so many people's sorrow that she had left. But ever since those experiences, I was somewhat sensitive to the spirit. I remember playing a basketball game when I was a teenager, and it was during a timeout. It was like I was listening to the coach give instructions. I was on the varsity basketball team, and during the time I was listening to the coach give instructions, and I remember a bolt of lightning hit me, and it was almost like there was just this cloud or this portal that I had seen. But when the bolt of lightning hit me, it was like boom, and it was like this fog or this cloud, and it just went away. I didn't think nothing of it. Kind of kept it in the back of my mind because I'm live at a basketball game, and so when I'm live, when I exit the timeout, I go on the court. A friend of mine who happened to play on the opposite team, on the other high school team, another inner city team, another inner city high school. He's coming down the court. He dribbles the ball in his right hand, crosses over to the left, does a spin move, and I'm guarding him. I take a charge, hoping the ref is going to call the charge. I look at the ref. The referee doesn't call the charge. He shoots a jump shot, makes the jump shot, and wins the game. Immediately, when the ball went through the net, the bolt of lightning hit me again. Boom. And I'm back at the timeout. So now I'm freaking out as a teenager, trying to keep it together. And as soon as I'm sitting there pondering, like, what's going on, the coach is sitting there like, come on, let's go to get back on the court. And so I'm slowly walking back on the court, just looking at everything and seeing that everything that I had just experienced is exactly happening like I just experienced it. They throw the ball into my friend from the other team. Once again, he dribbles the ball, and as he's dribbling the ball, I'm sitting there watching him dribble the ball, and I'm calling it out. You dribble from right to left. You do a spin move. I take a charge, and I literally followed it just the way I seen it before. So therefore, I knew I wasn't crazy. He did the spin move. I took the charge. Look at the ref. The ref doesn't call it. He shoots the jump shot, wins the game. I go off, walk off the court. People, for the most part, a lot of people silent, but I'm real quiet. And people are thinking I'm mad because we just lost the game, and they don't understand what I just experienced. And I literally told nobody, Apostle. I literally told nobody. I kept it to myself. But it was these experiences that I think the Christianity that was domesticated in me kind of gave an interpretation to my experiences. So I rightfully so gravitated more so to that belief and that doctrine. It was around 2003. I was watching a movie called Left Behind, supposed to be depicting about the rapture, the church, the end of the world, the Antichrist would rise. And I remember I was on the couch, I was smoking weed with two of my friends who happened to be blood gang members. And I'm watching the movie, and there was something said in the movie that caught my attention. And already I was looking for a change in my lifestyle. I mean, my friends were calling me every day, like, V, bring the strap. We got beef with this one. And I was looking for a change, Doc. I got tired of living that type of lifestyle. And my mother was calling me about the lifestyle I was living and wanted me to get back into church. And so I kind of gravitated back that way and literally left. I left all my friends, the life I was living in Nebraska, and moved back to New Orleans to attend a church that actually my grandfather was now an assistant pastor minister at the church as well, new church. And I really loved the church for the most part because it was new to me. What I had experienced at this church, I had never seen in church before. It was like they were flowing by the way of the Spirit. It's like you would go there and get a fresh word, the Rhema word that we would call it. Like the pastor was reading your mail, and you turn into an evangelist that you just want to tell everybody to come to your church and just come see. You got to hear and get all your answers, and and so I did that for I think about a year. I was in the church and just growing, in the things of what we call the things of God, reading the word, studying the word. Specifically, I used to love studying the gospels because my whole thing was that, man, if this Jesus is real, well, Doc, I want to do the stuff you doing. I want to be just like you. When I wound up actually becoming ordained as a deacon out here in Houston, because the church actually left New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina and came out here to Houston, and I followed the ministry out here to Houston, and I became ordained as a deacon, and we were setting up equipment, taking down equipment, because we didn't have a church home for a while, so we were holding services at hotels and TSU University. And so I just would be one of the deacons setting up equipment, taking down equipment. When the time to pass out envelopes for offering, we would do those things. But I remember one day the head deacon said to me, Vernon, y'all be prepared to take a second offering because Bishop is going to take a second offering after the message goes forth. And I had kind of paused. And I said, well, wait a minute, Deke. You mean to tell me when a bishop takes a second offering, it's not like it's some special move of God or a special flow of the spirit? Like all this stuff is pre-planned? He was like, well, yeah, they pre-planned to take a second offering. So it was at that point my eyes started to open when it came to church. That, in other words, what I started to see, the Jesus that I was reading in scripture just didn't align with what I was seeing going on in church. The things that I was seeing in church just didn't align with the Jesus that I was seeing in scripture. And I thought the bishop was very gifted man, a strong orator. And so I just wanted to really connect and grow in the things of God. And I remember going to him wanting to be a minister in training, because I wanted to actually flow in the gifts of the spirit to minister to people. And he told me at the time, no, just stay a deacon. And so for me, Apostle, it wasn't about a platform for me. It was about knowing God, being like Christ, doing the work of Christ. So I didn't need a platform. So when he told me no, I'm like, okay. So I went and did ministry myself. I literally would go downtown to Houston. I would minister to the homeless, those who were sick, those who were in wheelchair. I would exercise the same thing I was seeing Jesus do in scripture. That's what I was practicing. And through that, my work, I grew in my prophetic giftings, my discernment of spirits, the word of knowledge, word of wisdom. I just grew. During that time, I also having those experiences and being in church, I grew in worship. That me basking in worship, listening to worship music, I learned to be sensitive to the flow of the spirit. And I used to stay in worship for hours and in prayer. And these are things that I grew in. Eventually, I left the ministry I was at, went to another ministry, wound up teaching youth Bible study over there. And for the most part, I liked the ministry at the beginning because I liked how they were focused on death and life is in the power of the tongue. That you must watch what you say, watch your confessions, your affirmations. And I like that because we didn't get that at the last ministry. I mean, you would hear people say all kind of things that to me didn't align with the holy people or the royal priesthood that we were, children of God the most high. And I thought everything was cool for a while, but once, like I said, I got into ministry, stayed with the ministry for a while. There was a lot of economic decisions that was going on in the ministry that once again, it just didn't line up with the Jesus that I seen in scripture. I mean, we would literally have the bishop tell us that, we're going to have a conference. You ain't got to bring anything, pay for nothing. Just come. It's going to be a blessed time. Just come, bring your family. Everybody's going to enjoy themselves. And then when we would get at the conference, the bishop would say, okay, I'm going to need the ushers to close the door. The person on the end of the aisle, you're designated to be basically the offering gatherer for everybody on your bench. And we're going to need everybody to give $100. Or I would go to another conference when it's the pastor's anniversary and they literally have bishops up there acting like a DJ, trying to, basically have people to give more money. They set up two microphones. One was for $999 and under. The other one was for 1,000 and over, and it was called the Anointed Giving Mic. And I literally seen a lady walk up to the microphone of $999 and under and say, "Pastor, church, I'm giving my last $50 and I'm trusting God." And I literally heard the church. That's okay, baby. You keep trusting God. Well, one of Bishop's spiritual sons got up to the 1,000 and Mike and over Mike, and he said that me and my church are giving $30,000. We came together and we're giving $30,000, and the whole church broke out in praise. Jesus, I'm like, that don't align with the Jesus that I seen in Scripture. So from that point on, I started to slowly but surely seek the spirit for myself. Stop relying on, sitting under people, focusing on that, but really find where the spirit was leading me. I even heard in my spirit, the spirit say to me that to put away the Bible and to live from your spirit. And so I started to do that. I mean, how else can I really prove that Yeshua is real? You know, this Jesus that we're living for is real, if I can't actually know that by my spirit. And so that's what I started to do. And I started to connect with different ministries that I felt was operating in the gifts of the spirit, the supernatural, that actually was doing what I would call the work of ministry, apostle, where it wasn't just a thing where you would receive your message and after you're done, you know, as a family, you can go to IHOP or Denny's, and then in the next week you do it all over again. Like, nah, you know, yeah, that's good. The message goes forth, but after that, what about healing and deliverance? You know, the casting out demons. You know, well, what about the work of ministry, the work of the prophetic? You know, the work of the apostolic. And so I started to connect with ministries that, to me, had more of a focus doing these things because I already had an appetite for the prophetic based on my prophetic experiences, you know, already in my life. But eventually it came to the point, Apostle, where one day I'm watching TBN, Trinity Broadcast Network, and I want to say the host was Matthew Crouch. He had four end time prophetic teachers supposed to be the main prophetic voices. Um, and he asked them the question of concerning the end times where the Antichrist would arise from. And Apostle, all four of them gave a different answer. One said he would come out of Turkey. Another one said America's Babylon. One said out of Africa. I mean, European Union. I mean, there was just, I mean, a whole bunch of division that was going on. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. God is not the author of confusion. Man is. I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's something that's seriously wrong with this. And I remember asking the spirit, well, what was the truth? And I heard the spirit say, leave it alone. I'll show you what the truth is. Where it was a year later, I came across a teaching by a guy named Jonathan Welton. And he wrote a book. I was already following him because he wrote a book called School of the Seers. And I love the gifting on his life. He talks about, you know, what things he's able to see in the spirit. Like if somebody is needing healing, that maybe he may see somebody with knives in their back. And in the spirit, he's pulling out the knives, you know, out of their back. These are the type of things that he's able to see going on with people in the spirit. But he wrote a book called Raptureless. And it took the position of an eschatology that I never heard of before called preterism. Now, me myself, I never knew there were different types of eschatological views. All I knew about was the end of the world, the rapture, the church. There'd be the 7 years of tribulation, and the Antichrist would rise. Didn't know that that is actually classified as futurism, and that they have actually different sects within futurism that believe certain things. Some believe the rapture of the church will be pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, and post-tribulation, you know. And then you have preterism, where you have partial preterists and full preterists, historicism, idealism. So I started to study all these eschatological views, and preterism really stood out to me simply for the fact because it took the foundation, or its premise was, in order to understand the Bible, you have to understand context, culture, and chronology. And so when I started to read the word from that perspective, I had a lens change, apostle. I had a lens change. You know, like with the glasses, you start to see something you never seen before. But the spirit has already had throughout my life been dealing me with that, apostle. That for the most part, that's how my walk has been with the spirit, that it's allowed me to see something and then show me a lens change and see something that I never seen before, to grow in a level of awareness of something that's always been there, but you've never seen it like this before. You know, it's the epitome of revelation. You know, revelation doesn't speak of something that's going to happen. It's revealing what's already there. It's just unveiling what's already there, you know. And so it's always been about growing in my awareness. You know, I remember I had a dream. I was playing chess with the Holy Spirit. And it made a move where I was stuck. didn't know what to do, and it's just sitting there just smiling at me. Um, and it leans up to me and says, Vernon, sometimes it's not what you see that's the answer, but what you're not seeing. And when he said that, the inward pieces of the board moved to the outside, and then the outside pieces moved to the inside. And I would say for me, Apostle, when I had that dream, that was around 2013, I believe. That started my inward journey. That your show you have called The Inner, that started my inward journey because it caused me to have a lens change to see I was living from the outside in rather than the inside out. It started a lens change for me. And ever since that time, it's like the spirit has been causing me to have a lens change, to see something that I've never seen before, even concerning the doctrines of law versus grace. I remember I was working at Lakewood Church. I used to be in the data entry department, but I also was a part of the Stevens ministry at Lakewood Church under Joe Osteen, and part of the prayer ministry over there. And I remember I used to take the park and ride to the apartment where I was living at. And for 3 days in a row, it's like the spirit had me sit next to people who were demon possessed, Um, and I remember it was the third day. I got on the bus and sat right in the front, and there was this young sister, a black sister that was sitting on the front of the bus, and she was listening to some type of worship music, Christian music, because she was being tormented in her mind. I mean, she was going off. I mean, going crazy, you know. And they had people in the front of the bus that moved to the back of the bus because they didn't want to deal with the girl. And she just crying down. And I just literally sat there just to watch to see if anybody would say anything to the girl before I would say something. And nobody said nothing. Like I said, they moved to the back of the bus. So I began to minister to the girl, speak peace. She started to cry. You could just see the spirit of peace come upon her. Um, and then I told her, you encouraged her, it's like, don't let nobody judge you. They don't understand what you're going through, but God loves you. And it was like perfect timing, a synchronicity, because right when I said that, my stop came up and I was able to get off the bus. And I remember having a conversation with spirit, what we call God. And I remember telling God, like, man, God, this is messed up. Ain't nobody wanted to help that girl. I mean, she could have been thinking about suicide. Man, the devil was trying to kill this girl, and nobody wanted to help this girl. And I heard the spirit say to me so clearly, Vernon, filter it through grace. And I said, well, what do you mean, God? And I heard the spirit say to me, well, you can look at it from the perspective that it's messed up that nobody wanted to help that girl. Or you can look at it from a greater perspective that I love the girl so much. That's why I sent you. Lens change. Lens change, Doc. Awareness. Something that is right there, that's always been there, but you're just not paying attention. A revelation. You're not paying attention to something that's right there. I'll say this one, and I'll give it back to you. I remember I was in 2017. I still see me? Okay. I'm sorry. And after I married my wife, we started doing ministry together. We had online that I had two dreams. One was Dr. Miles Monroe, the other was Yeshua. And I remember the dream with Dr. Miles Monroe. I was sitting in the classroom and he was teaching about the kingdom. And then he calls me up in front of the classroom and says, Vernon, come with me. And he takes me into another room. It was a connecting room, a joining room. And in the other room, it was this professional studio, looked like a professional music studio where you had two grand pianos that was in the room. And then one piano, you had this church pastor, worship leader that was at one piano. And then the other piano was a brother that was in the orchestra. The church pastor had a pinstripe, a two-piece suit on. He had some double monk strap shoes on. He had a beard, crisp and line. I mean, the brother looked fly. The brother looked clean, doc. The other brother in the orchestra had a t-shirt and jeans on. And Dr. Miles Monroe says to me, Vernon, you see the brother with the t-shirt and jeans on? I said, yes, sir. He said, that's where the kingdom of God is at, not the one in the church. Lens change. The next dream I had was Yeshua. Um, Yeshua had appeared to me, he had walked up to me in the dream, and it's like we were on this road traveling. And the way he looked like he was a black man mixed with a Middle Eastern descent, is how I would say he looked. So his hair was, you can say, long, kind of curly, but it was like a mix of you can think of a black person mixed with Middle Eastern descent. And I'm walking with him on the road, and he's not saying anything to me. I'm just walking with him. But I begin to notice that there's a blue car in the distance that turns red. There's also a chair that's in our path as we're walking. It's like we're walking on a sidewalk, and the chair literally moves out of the way with nobody touching it. The blue car turns red, and the chair just moves out of the way. And then I look at him like, Doc, you seen what's going on? And then I look at him and I discern in my spirit, oh, you're doing this. These things are obeying you. And then he communicates to me telepathically and says to me, this is what it means to be a king, Vernon. This is what it means to be a God. This is who you are. This is who you all are. This is what you already are doing. You just don't know it. You just don't know it yet. Lens change. So I say that to say, Doc, that I realize with my walk that the spirit, that if we look at time, we talk so much about time is really an illusion, that it's only the now. And to me, that's what the message of grace really is. It speaks about the now, something that is already there, that speaks of what God's work is, not man's work. you know, not the leaven, it's not man's leaven, it's God's work that is already there. And more, I think that what the Spirit has caused me to realize in my walk is to get us into that place of authenticity, not through becoming, but through being. That it's through being we come to that place. That it's learning to relax, learning to rest, learning to accept of what is finished. It's like the great Yoda said, you must unlearn what you have learned. Yes, sir.
That's powerful. You mentioned something earlier that connected with a story from my childhood when you were talking about yours, and even brought it back to how you just finished it off. One of the things that I teach is that pretty much children are the closest thing to God. When they enter into this plane, they are already functioning for the most part in their blueprint from heaven.
Right.
And they go through a process of unlearning their blueprint and learning the ways of this world,
Mm-hmm.
which means that children oftentimes find it easier to move in the things of the spirit. The way that our systems are set up, we train each other out of our heavenly flow. An example of this, right? I pretty much had to teach myself. It was just me and Yeshua, right? I had to learn on my own how to do all the things of the spirit because no one else knew how to do them. And I grew up Baptist, so it was, you're not even supposed to
Right.
worry about that stuff. So
Right.
I had to reteach myself everything. And I say reteach because as a kid, I remember doing things that I still have not redeemed my mind enough to walk in again. An example, right? I'm an apostle, I'm a prophet, I carry many hats, walk in many functions, I do a lot. But even now, with the status of spirituality that I'm at right now, I haven't done something of the caliber of one of my memories from when I was in the 5th grade.
Okay.
I remember this was my 5th grade year, and we were getting ready to move back to our hometown. I lived in Baytown for a period of time, and then we were getting ready to move back to Beaumont. And the teachers knew that I was getting ready to move, so they didn't get us any. They didn't get me any textbooks. Like, the school was poor, so they didn't order resources for a kid that they knew was getting ready to leave. And this
Hmm.
particular day, the teacher had us reading around the class. Like, we were reading this passage, we were reading through this book that was in one of our massive textbooks, and each kid was reading a paragraph. And I entered into a flow where I was helping the other students with the words. When they'd get to a word and they didn't know how to pronounce it, I'd say it out loud and help them out. And then we kept going, and then eventually it was my turn, and I recited my whole paragraph perfectly, didn't miss a beat. And then it went on, and maybe 2 3 students later, the teacher happened to pass by my desk and said, "Where's your book?" I was like, "Oh, I don't have a book, y'all didn't give me one." She said, "Well, how are you reading?" I was like, "I don't know." Just in the
Wow.
flow of the spirit, I
Right.
not only read my paragraph
Wow.
from a book that didn't exist, but I was able to help my classmates with their book,
Wow.
reading their
Right.
passages. Like, they're over there stammering, but I'm like, it's because, okay, the word is that, I'm helping them out. The teacher's like, "Good job." She just think I'm just good at this, but no, I'm flowing in the spirit before I knew what flowing in the spirit was. To this day, I haven't done anything that smooth since that moment. Which, like you were just talking about, that lens reset, there's something that we have as children that we lose by the time we become an adult, and that's kind of foundational in our dysfunction. Is that the thing that we come here with is the thing that we need to actually keep things going in the right direction long term. The utopia that people are looking for isn't in a bunch of adults doing things by logic and reason alone, but it's in the mindset of the children. When they come here, they already have the solution. One of the things that I've also heard people say is that, just based on like family and bloodlines and things like that, is that the children often come in the form of the solution to their parents' problems.
Right. Yes, sir.
Whatever the
Hmm.
mom and or dad was struggling with,
Hmm.
the kid will usually come in the form of the solution to that problem. Uh, for example, one of my grandparents struggles with boundaries. Not that that grandparent get disrespects other people's boundaries, but that grandparent has a hard time setting boundaries. So they'll let the same person hurt them over and over again. Well, my parent, and I'm speaking vague because I got family that watch my channel. One of my parents is the solution to that. So where that grandparent doesn't set boundaries, that parent steps in and will be that boundary. It's like, "No, you hurt them before. You have not changed. You're trying to do it again." The solution is in the kids. And I've
Hmm.
often said that the reason that we fail as a society is because we don't actually nurture children to be adults. We bubble wrap kids until they're adults, and then we throw them into a world that wasn't made for their greatness, right?
Right. Yes, sir.
I've gotten in trouble for saying something along the lines of, if you don't care about adults, you don't really care about kids.
Mm.
Where it's
Wow.
like, if you think about their future
Right.
as being an adult, what happens is you give kids dreams, you tell them they can do anything they want to do, the possibilities are endless. And then when they graduate, you say, "Oh, welcome to the real world." Nope, you don't get to do none of your dreams. You got to struggle, you got to fight to survive.
Right.
It's like, no, if you actually care about kids, we would be more progressive
Right.
in making sure that adult life didn't kill everybody's dreams as soon as it started.
Right. Uh, um. I've had those experiences. Well, first of all, I've come to the awareness of what you're saying, that you are the solution, to your parents, issues. That you, as they would say, the buck stops with you. That you have to stop the generational curses. And for anybody who don't believe that we inherit energetically things from our parents, I remember my mother um, dropped out of college when she was younger. Um, didn't know what she went to school for, had no idea. But I wound up dropping out of school when I was going for computer science. And after I dropped out, I had a conversation with my mom, and she told me that she dropped out of school for computer science. It was then that I realized, man, you can be making decisions and you're not even aware that you're just repeating a cycle. You're just repeating a cycle. And so awareness is big, apostles, because yeah, we want to be able to change direction, change course, with a lot of things. But at the same time, I think one of the things that's big, apostle, is that I think we put too much guilt on ourselves for not being a certain way in society. I remember the first ministry I was a part of. There was a lot of things going on where the bishop, he was messing with one of his spiritual son's wives, and you had this prophetess came. It was time for her to preach, and I remember I was sitting next to the bishop as a deacon, and I remember the prophetess said in her message, she said across the pulpit, "When the pastor is holy, the people are holy. When the pastor is holy, the people are holy." And that's always stuck with me. And lately, it's been ringing even more, because when I look at the landscape of America, things that's going on in the world, I don't beat people up for being in debt. Why would I? You have a country that thrives off of debt. I mean, something as simple as that, when we really critically think and take into context the system that we live within, you know, why would I beat people up because their marriages are failing, when based on the system, the divorce rate of marriage is what, 80%, 70%? I mean, these are the things that we have to re-examine, reevaluate the fact that, Doc, it's time for us to leave this system in the way we've been doing things, and ingratiate ourselves in a new system, incorporate ourselves in a new way of thinking, because failure is inevitable when we live off of these systems, when we live off of this mindset, when we live off of these rules, how they train us to think, how they train us to function, um, especially when you think about kids. And right now they have a whole agenda where they're trying to brainwash kids like never before. You can see even here in America. So yeah, I'm with you, Doc. I'm with you, Doc. And I do believe that, yeah, it starts with individuals like us who are conscious, who are growing in a level of awareness, who recognize divinity and recognize our identity, or growing in our identity in divinity. That, Doc, we need a new system. That, and there's a system that exists, that is available for us to access, that speaks naturally of who we are. And you can tell it. It speaks naturally of who we are. That the system that we live within this world in America, Doc, is not divine. It's not based off of divinity. It's not based off of what is divine. There's something wrong when you still, as a people, are dealing with homelessness. You have to still work for food, work for water. There's something wrong when you need to have the basic necessities of life to thrive, that is not automatically given to you. There's something wrong with that system, Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need a new system.
Yeah. because for some reason the idea of basic necessities being met for everyone, it's an argument for some reason.
Right.
Like we could argue over luxuries.
Right.
Everyone doesn't need luxury homes and cars. Yeah, yeah, sure. No argument there. Food, water, clothes,
Right.
shelter. That's it,
Uh-huh.
right? Those are things that everyone should have. Am I saying everybody need a mansion? No, 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 no. But they shouldn't be left to the elements of, you know, it's hot in Texas.
Right.
It's hot in
Real hot.
Texas with an air conditioner.
Right.
They
Yes, sir.
need somewhere to be where the sun isn't just their only fellowship, you know. And one of the things that I can say is more and more people like you and I have been coming up with proactive ways to create that system that we see as necessary because the government's not going to do it. They thrive on the fact that it's not there. Therefore, they're never going to solve a problem that they benefit from. What
Right.
happens is when us, the people, get together, we organize, not just complain. Complaining is step one of solving problems. You got to complain first. And then once we organize, we begin to actually solve some of these problems. One of the things I'd like for you to touch on a bit, just in the flow of that, you mentioned how Yeshua came to you in a dream. Now, mind you, the way that he appeared in your dream is the same way he looks all the times that I've met him when he chose to look like a human. But talk a little bit about what the kingdom of God being manifested on the earth really looks like from your perspective.
Well, I can tell you first thing is, me studying in scriptures, and living by my spirit, I realized a long time ago, that people miss a key point that Yeshua makes in scripture, that he says the kingdom is within you, which is amazing because everybody's still looking for this kingdom to come out of the sky that's going to set itself down in Jerusalem, and yet the amazing thing about that apostle, that the context of that scripture, Yeshua wasn't talking to his disciples. He was talking to the religious leaders of that day when he said to them, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. So he was giving them grace. He was showing them that this thing is already here, Doc. It's already present within you. Are you born again to recognize it, to discern it, to see it? Have you grown in awareness of it? So that to me, that's the first thing that we must acknowledge, that this kingdom is not something that is going to manifest externally. It does manifest in ways external because it is both outward and within. It's within and without. But it's not this physical kingdom that people are looking for to come. No, it's something that goes on within you. And for me personally, I believe because all of us are the Christ, that means we all function as a facet of the kingdom by operating in our own metaphysical kingdoms. I can't see through your eyes. I don't hear through your ears. I don't even feel your energy. I only feel mine. Therefore, my sphere, my energy is my kingdom. It is my kingdom. My kingdom is manifesting what comes into my reality. My thoughts is manifesting the evidence of what it is I'm thinking. My emotions is manifesting the evidence of what it is that I'm feeling. That this is a simulation that we live in. And this simulation each of us have is called a kingdom. Now, to me, kingdom, the terminology is really, you can say, a metaphor if you want to say it that way. Because to me, there's a science behind it, apostle. There's a science behind these things, that this thing is energetic, that if there's energy, there's vibration, there's frequency, well, then that means there's magnetism to this thing. And so since there is a magnetism, to this thing. The way a magnet attracts another magnet is based on its own vibration. It's not like the magnet is focusing on the other magnet. No, it emits its own vibration, its own energy of magnetizing that causes an attraction. And it's not opposites attract, it's opposite sides of the same thing. See, that's a big point because everything is relationally. Everything is relationally. And because everything is relationally, like when you think of marriage, there is not an argument, there is not a rift that exists in marriage that two people, when they're arguing, you're really arguing the same thing on different sides of the spectrum. That's all. You really are arguing the same thing on different sides of the spectrum because really there's a magnetism going on, whether it be negative or positive. And I'm highlighting that first because if we're energy, if I have my own kingdom, then I think the first thing that's necessary, Apostle, is self accountability. One thing I learned from Dr. Miles Monroe, the kingdom responds to the king. And if you really believe you have the consciousness of Christ, you don't blame others for what goes on in your reality. You grow as the Christ you are. You grow as the lordship that you have, the king that you are, the God that it is you are. And you begin to look at life from a perspective of, well, what is it that I'm doing, thinking, feeling, speaking to manifest this reality? And it doesn't just work with what we call the elements, it works with people. I remember one day I had wrote on my cell phone that when I get in my wife's presence, her arm is going to start itching, where she's going to have to scratch it like it's uncontrollable. So I went upstairs to where my wife was at, and I just sat there. She was watching a movie in my media room, and I just sat there for about 3 minutes, just meditating on what it was that I said was going to happen. Next thing you know, 3 minutes later, she starts scratching her leg, scratching her arm, just scratching real hard. And then I show her the cell phone, what I wrote on the cell phone. That I wrote, your arm, when I get in your presence, is going to start itching uncontrollably. This happens all the time, Apostle. It happens all the time. We just don't realize what it is that's going on and what it is that we're doing. I think, to simplify your question, it's not like I'm trying to escape from it, but for me, when there's peace within, the war ceases. The war ceases when there's peace within. When you ever look at war movies, when the war is over, there's like a wind that comes, and there's just a peace, just a calm. Well, that war first starts with us as individuals. Are you warring with yourselves? Are we warring with ourselves? Are we double-minded? Are we dealing with fears? Are we dealing with doubts? Are we dealing with those shadow aspects of us that is unhealed? Those shadow aspects of us that we don't want to incorporate because we're afraid. That's why we leave them as shadows, when the only reason they're a shadow is because you haven't shed light on the issue. That's it. There's aspects of us that's trying to get out and we're not shedding light. That's why it's a shadow, because anytime you shed light on a shadow, it's no longer a shadow. It's no longer a shadow. And I think the inner work starts with us first. And by us doing that inner work, we become magnetic. We start to attract those things into our reality. We start to see where healing is needed, where deliverance is needed. But if you are not growing in meekness yourself, you can't heal in meekness. You can't deliver with meekness. You have to grow in healing yourself. And so for me, I think that is the kingdom, is realizing you are the king. So since you are the king, everything that you are, your cells, your energy, your organs, your body, your vessel, is your kingdom. And it's emitting an energy. It's emitting a field, a field around you. You can look at this field that's around you. Go water your grass on a sunny day and just move the hose around. You can see the rainbow spectrum that's there, and you'll see the ring around you. You can see the physical evidence that's there, that there is a force field, as we can say, that is around you, that's emanating from you. But I think it starts with our own self awareness, becoming conscious of ourselves. And that takes 100% responsibility, which is the most challenging thing that I think we can do, Apostle. Is taking 100% responsibility for our own life and what goes on in our own life. And when we do that, I think we become magnetic and we attract those things into our reality, or we're at least are able to give wisdom, because ultimately words are good, but they really don't teach. It's life experience that teaches you something. I've said many things to people about things that the Spirit has shown me. They still went their own way. They did their own thing because it's an experience. This life we live is an experience. The number one sense that we operate from is not sight, it's not hearing, it's feeling. This thing is meant to be felt. Yes, sir.
Powerful. I could tell you've been in the same conversations I've been in, because even just yesterday, I'll tell you a different version of the story off camera, but
Okay.
yes, you and I were having a conversation. It's a similar conversation we have over and over again. And something that we usually experience when being with him, having those dialogues, is that he exposes our blockages and our levels of unbelief in the form of a lot of what you just said, is realizing your ability to do the same things that he's doing. He's like, oh no, stop asking me to do it. You can do it. Just like, okay. Um, how? He's like, nope, I need you to agree with me first that you can do it, and then the how will come when you go do it. It's like, all right, all
Mhm. Yes, sir.
right. Getting in the right
Mhm.
mindset of not only can I do it, but I'm supposed to. Because there's a part of us that lingers from religion that tells us to do the things of God is to consider yourself equal to or even greater than God. And it's like, no, 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 no. Religion's just wrong on that. To do the things of God and do the greater works of Christ is the best way to honor Christ. He didn't set himself as a pinnacle, he set himself as a bar to be surpassed. Like when I first started my journey, the verse that I would read on repeat all day, every day was John 14, 12, where he said, if you believe in me and the works that I do, those same works shall you do. And then greater works than these shall you do, because I go to the Father. I was like, whoa, I'm able to do the same stuff that he did. And once I started to change my mentality on that, remember, grew up Baptist, I was taught he's the only one that can do those things. And then here I am seeing him say, no, you believe I can do it, you can do it. So many times when I meet with him, it's a conversation along those lines of him convincing me, or at least trying to convince me, to not just think bigger, but to practice using those bigger thoughts in practical life. Right. An experience I had a few years back, and I think this is the first time I shared this story on camera. I went into the heavens to meet with him, and we were in this overvoid. So we were actually outside of the heavens where we went. That's another topic on realms outside of heaven. But we were in this void, like all white room, and there was a pedestal with this, let's just say, a large reddish orangish marble sitting on this pedestal. And he said, move it. And without second thought, telekinetically, I flung the marble off the pedestal. It bounced around for a bit and rolled across the floor. He looked at me and grinned and said, you don't know what that was. I said, you're right. What was it? He said, that was all of creation. It was like, did I break it? He was like, no. Uh, he's like, you believe you were able to do that because you believe that your spirit could. You don't exercise that same level of grace in the natural because you think there's a disconnect. So he spent maybe an hour rephrasing that to me in hopes that I get it. I still struggle in that regard because I'm like, wow, I know my spirit can do it, but my body. And he's like, there's not really a difference. Everything that you think your spirit can do, your body and your soul can do. All of you can do all these things. It's just that we've been trained that the supernatural is only in fiction.
Right,
So it's easier for us to engage something via the imagination or even as our actual spirit than it is for us to let that happen in this world. And
right.
that's one of the things that he's constantly convicted me of and pushed me in is no, use that same spiritual status to bring order to the world around you.
Yeah, I think that our beliefs, as you were talking about us, how we were raised as children, certain things just being indoctrinated has played a big factor in us being able to really operate in our identity in divinity. And it's not just the fears or the unbelief, the lack of love or unworthiness that many times that we can feel in humanity. To me, it's also the structure how we're taught to see things many times is off. Like, for example, if I say conscious, somebody would say there's also a subconscious, which I would not disagree with, but the subconscious is not below consciousness, it's above consciousness. And then there's a higher consciousness. But it's a subtlety just like that that you start to shift your lens, where now you're trying to find something that's below consciousness that isn't there, not realizing that consciousness is the lowest level and that
Yep.
you can go, because there's a subconscious, there's the unconscious, where speaks of more of the something automatic, that consciousness is the lowest level. But to me, it's our structure, even how we're framed, we're trained to think, that we're trained to think that we're supposed to think, like you're trained to think that you have to think, not realizing that the heart, when you live from the heart will actually cause you to think. That's in line with the heart. See, I can actually think thoughts, and most of the thoughts that we're trained to think, especially when it comes to our desires, think in a way that speaks of resistance. So that's why it's hard for people to say, I want to be a millionaire, and automatically for it to happen today or tomorrow, for these things to manifest, because we're trying to force a thought for something that we really don't have freedom in our spirit to experience. There's still too much negative beliefs. There's still too much wrong framing of structure that's within us, that there's no freedom in thinking. I can pick up this bottle of water and I can drink it, think about it. There's no resistance at all. There's just a knowing, because I don't have to think about it. There's a knowing. It's here in the cardia that there's a knowing that flows, that out of the belly flows the rivers. There's a knowing that's there, where everything should be like that. That everything should be feel that natural, that it's a knowing. Will Smith did a movie, was it The Legend of Bagger Vance, where he told the guy, who was it, I can't remember the guy who played in Jason Bourne, I can't remember his name, but he told him in the movie that your hands is smarter than your than your mind will ever be, because he was trying to get him to understand this should feel natural. It should feel authentic. It shouldn't feel like you're trying to force will. It should feel free will. There's a
Right.
difference. But these are things you are growing in. That if you can't think the thoughts you want to think freely, it's because there's still too much resistance of energy within you. And it could be your belief systems or just how you were trained to think. But yeah, I think as we're growing in these things, oh yeah, we're going to see a whole lot of exploits that's
Yeah.
going to happen, Apostle.
You mentioned a powerful key there that, like, a, that's something that I've always policed myself in prayer. When I was praying in that format, is that if I felt like I was trying too hard, I would just stop. It's like, I feel like I'm begging, I feel like I'm performing. It
Right.
actually does not take all of this.
Right. Yes, sir.
It is what it is. And then I'd move on.
Yes, sir.
So I like that. It's recognizing what comes easy, what comes natural more so, and letting that be. And then for the things you want to start incorporating, it's a shifting of consciousness to make those things normal so that they come normal, rather than taking something abnormal and trying to force it into your reality. I like that. But uh one of the things so one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on a little bit, and this will pretty much be my last question before we start to wrap up. Uh, a lot of times when dealing with the things of the world, there's a branch of idea of pretend that nothing's happening and then it'll be fine. This is usually given for us, the Black community in America. It's like, well, y'all experience racism because y'all don't stop talking about racism. I guess the way that I could frame it as a question is, in a world, okay, what is the solution that you see regarding, uh, let's just say, the freedom of Black people from systematic oppression? That's the best way I think I could verbalize that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that question, Doc. In my opinion, I think was it last year sometime I had watched a video. I think it took place in the 1960s, and you had some strong Black pioneers on the show, and they were debating about having discussions about what was the solutions for the Black community. And I remember listening to them and thinking to myself, man, it's past 2020 and we still are talking about the same things since 1960. And so for me, Apostle, my solution is I'm done with the complaining. I'm past the complaining point for me because I'm not expecting white people to have answers for our community because they're not Black. That's like me trying to give answers to a woman. I'm not a female. That's not my experience. And so the complaining to me, I understand it. I understand that energetically, anytime we complain, that doesn't negate the positive energy of our desire and the momentum of it still existing. And so there's a science terminology. I'm sorry, I'm losing track of what the terminology is right now. But nevertheless, what I believe is that it's time for us to focus on ourselves, Doc. It's time for us to really play offense and stop playing defense. It's time for us to live from the freedom of our heart. And I think one of the things that is going to help free a lot of Black people is when we stop living by the standard and illusion of the system, as though the system has a standard when it's never had a standard. No, the standard exists within you. You are the standard. We are creating our own standard. And I think when people begin to see that, they'll move differently. They won't feel like there's so much expectations that we have to meet. I mean, when you look at just how we structure, I had so many African brothers talk about how America is stressful. compared to how they live in Africa, because they don't have all that stress and pressure to meet deadlines and expectation, doc. That's not God. That's not the divine. The divine don't operate like that. The divine don't need to do nothing in a rush, in a hurry. It don't need everything with the divine is effortless. It's a flow. It's a gentleness to it. That's all this system that has trained us to be like that in that war mode, and we have to conquer and defeat and dominion. That ain't the divine. The divine is in control. He don't need to control nobody, doc. That's all us. So I believe for our people, doc, it's at the point in time when we're at that pivotal point where it's time to go within, to realize our identity is in divinity, that we are divine, that the system that we have seen where they've used our inventions, they've used our innovations, they've used and relied on our artistry, our creativity, our care that it is we give. It's time for us to focus on ourselves and completely ignore them, is what I would say. And I'll say this in closing. One thing I realized a long time ago in ministry, doc, because I used to do different revivals. Different ministers would have me come help them with the revivals, and we used to do healing and deliverance. And one thing I learned a long time ago when I was practicing cast out demons, because I've had those days where you're trying 3 days to cast out a demon out of a person, and you're sweating tears and everything, and you're not getting nothing, and I realized that what we call the devil always loved worship. It
Mhm.
always loved attention. And so if you believe in the devil, or the enemy, why would you even give it attention? Why would you even focus on it? And so what I began to do was, rather than focus on the demonic spirit in the individual, I would focus on the grace in the human. I would focus on the seeds of righteousness and water that within the individual. I would focus on what I wanted to see, what I felt the spirit was telling me, what needed to happen in the individual, not the demon. And when I did that, the demon left automatically. It left effortlessly anytime I did that. And I say that to say that I look at it the same way from the context of this white nationalism, so-called white supremacy. It's time for us to ignore the devil, doc. It's time for us to see the seeds of righteousness that we are, what we have a right to focus on that and water that. There's a beauty that's in us that can't be matched. That no one can touch, doc. It really is. We've always been a spiritual people, a soulful people, doc. And I think this is our hour to grow in our divinity, become more aware of it, develop unity in community. Yeah. And like we're doing right now, finding our agreement, finding the similarities, bouncing things off of one another, seeing what truth is. So therefore, we have our liberation. We operate in our liberality. And it's not going to be based on this system, doc. It's just not, because the system wasn't designed for us to succeed. So why even play the game? It's time we play a different game.
I love that because similar to you, I it was a somewhat heartbreaking and enraging situation I found myself in where I was listening to James Baldwin. A lot
Okay.
of people don't know that that man was a prophet, but authentically one of the greatest prophets that we had recently. And I was listening to a interview slash debate that he was doing on I think it was the Dick Cavett show, and almost word for word, he was having a conversation that I've had.
Hmm.
And I'm like, something's got to change. This is 60, 50, 60 years apart. And word for word, we're still having the same conversation. I think we're shooting too short.
Right.
And
Hmm.
it's around that
Wow.
point where I
Hmm.
begin to
Yes.
say, if we wanted revenge, we'd already have equality.
Hmm. Wow.
Not saying that we need to shift and want revenge, but it takes a greater hunger for better collectively for us to finally get that better. We've grown
Right.
numb uh instead of being inspired. we've gotten numb. And I believe right now this is the perfect scenario, like you were saying, for us to actually begin to build a system that works for us. Because this system
Right.
wasn't designed to work for us. The US system was designed on slaves. We were never supposed to get free. And that's been a problem
Right.
they've been trying to fix since that
Right.
happened.
You
Uh,
take us out of the equation, see how successful it is. you know,
yeah.
you know, like
But Um, so what I want to do is I want to give you the floor for a moment to share any last bits of wisdom that you have for the audience, and then at the end of it, you can share the places where people can connect with you at.
yeah, I appreciate it, Apostle. Yeah, my people, I would say that you are God, you are the divine, you are the Christ. You don't need a book to tell you your identity. You know your identity. You don't need a ministry, a church. Many things are great, but a lot of these things are just permission slips. That's all it is. It's just permission slips we're giving to ourselves to grow in our own divinity. So, because you are God, flow in your joy, find your joy. If you're still struggling with that, it's okay. You're an eternal being. You're an eternal being. You're an infinite being. It's okay. You don't have to get it done by tomorrow, but you'll get it done. You'll get it done. It's okay. And don't settle. Don't sell yourself short. Think big. Many times we think too small. Many times we've outgrown the bed that we've been sleeping in. It's time for a bigger bed. It's time for bigger things that we're thinking too small. And that's why things don't work. We do need to think bigger. We need to have larger visions because many times we're selling ourselves short because we're still thinking we're short, we're small because we're basing our viewpoint of the eyes of the system, of those who control the system, and not who we really are. Not who we really are. And so I would say follow your joy, follow your passions, because there is a strength to that. And when you do that, continue to do it because it will develop a discipline, a momentum in following your joy that will make things easier to tap into your own divinity. One of the great things you can do to operate in healing, deliverance, or what we call the supernatural is to walk and grow in self love, unconditional love, where you feel that love for yourself and you're able to give that out to someone else. That's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful force, is love, because I believe the universe exists and operates on unconditional love. Yes, sir. And you can reach me. You can find me on Facebook, Vernon Jiles. I'm also on TikTok. I've been doing videos on there. I am Vernon LLC. I also do music. I'm an artist, so be on the lookout for that as well. I love music. I really do. I love music. Started off when I was younger in poetry, and now I do spoken word, hip hop music. Yeah, I can write, ghost write. Yeah, I love music. So, but that's how you can reach me. I really appreciate it, Apostle. Man, always a blessing. And let me say this to Apostle, because I said this before the call to him. I remember being younger, his age, in ministry in church, and people saying to me, like, "Man, young man, you got wisdom beyond your years." And so it's so refreshing to be able to look back at him and see, like, man, how the spirit is just always at work, doc. It's always at work, and got the next generation, yeah, the next generation right there. And so as elders and older people, we do need to listen to the younger generation because they do have something to say. The voice of God, the spirit is in them as well. We need to recognize wisdom is not just because you have your age, it's many times because of experience, and the younger people have experienced God more so many times than we have as the older generation. Yes, sir.
It's powerful. And you mentioned music. So I gotta ask one more childish question before we close. Top five artists.
Oh man, that's tough, Doc. Man, that's tough. My favorite top five. I'll give my favorite top five that I listen to is probably Jay Z, Eminem, uh, Common, Kendrick, and Kanye. I'll say that's my top five that I
It's not
listen to.
bad. Only disagree with two of them, but you know, we good. We good. Not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all right. Well, this has been a powerful conversation, y'all. Please make sure to check out some of Vernon's stuff. He and I gonna be doing a lot in the Southeast Texas area between now and next year. So be on the lookout. Y'all gonna see him again. But with that being said, that's the end of this episode of The Inner. Until next time, y'all be blessed. Later.